Good. Just kidding. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Call the meeting of the House Higher Education Committee meeting to order. We have two items on the agenda this afternoon. Senate Bill 333 from Senator Albers and Senate Bill 397 from Senator Goodman. We're going to go with Senator Albers' presentation first, and you should all have in your packet and should have been sent to our members online electronically, LC 500388S. We had a little confusion because there were multiple versions of the bill. One showed up in my office today, and we needed to make a change to a date that the senator can speak to. So that's what we have as our version. But I'm going to let the senator go through and present the bill. We're not going to take action on the bill today. It's going to be our first hearing, and we'll make sure we have the exact language. But I think back over in line 500, Senator. Yeah, it's line 538 was the change that we made this morning that just was agreed to, I believe, in the Senate, but it didn't find its way in the bill. And the senator can explain to us what we're doing with that $10 million in July 1st, 2040. But that's the change that we tried to make to your proposition, Senator. Otherwise, we will ultimately work with the as passed version from the Senate with that single change. And that's what will be back before the committee. So, Senator, will tell us about your proposition.
Thank you, Mr. The Georgia Post-Secondary Education Commission, and all of a sudden they were in violation of not having filed all their information, having to submit all of their financials, and this would have been a very burdensome and costly affair for them. So I immediately called up to Director Shook, and he and his team have just been phenomenal, and he is here today, and he'll be able to help answer any questions that I am ill-equipped to. What we found out is this is a great organization that was founded decades ago. However, the genesis and reasoning for them to be founded was really to govern those institutions that were offering degrees and certifications to make sure we didn't have a fly-by-night group come into Georgia, set up, and then leave our students hanging. In fact, most of us remember or have read something to do with Argosy University a few years back, when they closed up shop in the middle of the night and disappeared. Now, those are certainly the exceptions to the rules. We have many great colleges, both private and public, and technical colleges, and other groups do a phenomenal job. And what we looked at this is a great opportunity. And again, my kudos to Governor Brian Kemp and Director Shook for saying, you know what, maybe this is an opportunity to have less and more effective and transparent government. So we spent several months here during the summer and fall working on this together with Director Shook and his team. And what this does is it limits the oversight to only schools who are offering degrees and certificates. Makes sense. The second thing it does is it reduces some of the regulations. There was a bunch of references in the original bill to agents, the people who are trying to get people to sign up to go to the school. Well, the agents weren't necessarily the problem. It was the school itself to make sure that they were the ones that were going to be able to meet the obligations of that student who signed up to achieve a certain degree program and or certificate. The next part was bonding. As you can imagine, when someone is brand new and doesn't have any wherewithal and they come in to do this, we would want them to have some type of a bonding or financial play in this should they fold their tent and disappear. However, when you think of a very, very large organization coming into Georgia, that might be a little different. So this gives a little flexibility back to the director and to his board in order to allow those folks to pay into that system a little higher and only assess bonds on those they think that financially need to have those bonds. And that's very important. One of the things that we put in this bill that I believe is in the substitute in front of you is we thought we wanted all the bonds to only be issued from an agent in Georgia. However, we found out that that would actually put us in a precarious position with the way we set up between interstates, and that could actually harm the rest of the agents in Georgia. So we legally couldn't do that. So there's a change to fix that. And the last thing is today, there's about $4 million or so in the current fund, which sounds good. However, if you think about what if there is a catastrophic failure of one of those institutions, and in talking to the director, we came up with raising that number over time as they continue to assess fees up to $10 million. So we believe that's the right number should there ever be a need to deploy those monies. This is a bill is pretty large in the amount of words and pages you see in front of it, but a lot of it is simply going through and striking out things like agent over and over and over again. That's really kind of the genesis of the bill. And I can take you through section by section if you want to, Mr. Chairman, but I'll leave it up to your discretion.
I'm gonna have to turn you off and on so we don't get feedback. Thank you, Senator. But we'll let me ask the members if they have questions, and then we'll go back and we may touch on some of the sections. Did you have something? Hit me with a number there so I can just press the go button and it'll should flash here. It does not. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Chairman Albers. So 2 questions that came to mind as I was going through this. One, in section 8, it does get rid of kind of the tiered structure regarding the minimum bond that's required. So I'm assuming that this simply provides the executive director and the commission a lot more discretion as to what the minimum bond would be. In the event that the commission or executive director declines to approve, some sort of program under this, what then kind of becomes the due process for an applicant?
Right. So and I'll let the commissioner come up and address that specifically. However, under section 8, what it does, it gives the flexibility for someone who, if they believe that they don't need to have a bond, right, they will pay in at a higher rate than they paid before because they won't have to forego the costs of a bond, right? But as far as the bond, then they are going to assess the financial wherewithal of that institution and say, you need a bond and a bond by X amount of dollars, right? It's up to that institution then to go out and to get that bond, do what they need to do, not necessarily the commission's job to agree or disagree with that. They just have to say, this is what we're setting at based on the assessment we have completed on that institution.
And if the institution says this is unfair, then what then kind of becomes the next step?
I'm going to turn, if okay, Mr. Chairman, to the commissioner.
Sure. You can either share the microphone over there with the senator, because I think somebody has used our room and there are probably other microphones that are living under that table. So you're going to have to share that one with Senator Albers, if you would.
Well,
So I think the question was, we're taking off the table with the preconceived bond limitations. And if you could also answer Representative Parks and also go into what we talked about in the office the other day about the difficulty of actually exercising the bond and why it's more important to have perhaps what I'll refer to as your sinking fund to make students whole. You can do that quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, the bond numbers that we had there, 250,000, all those things, until last year had never been changed. Last year, through your committee, Representative Wiedauer carried a bill for us, and one of the things we did was add in a couple additional tiers to that, because that language and the numbers were there from 1992 when the agency was founded. So we tried to do some updates with that, but in talking with the governor's office, talking with Senator Albers, we thought that it would be more beneficial to the state of Georgia for when bonding is required, which we would assume might only be in, half a dozen or so cases, because it's going to be based upon the financial stability of the institution, for the commission to set those amounts, because as we saw this last year, inflation was what, 7%, 0.5% or whatever it was. This can help us better keep up with inflation, not have to come through the legislative process every time. So that's there because that gives us that flexibility. To answer your question earlier about what if the institution decides that it's, what the commission said is unfair. There is a process that is written into our code currently, and it's still there, not changed, where they can go through a hearing process. And we have it set up in policy through an administrative law judge, and that's the first step. The next step, they can go to Superior Court and do the judicial review process just like anybody else can. So there is a due process that's on that they can follow just like any other issue they have with state government that is still in our code. So they have that ability if there is that. But to the chairman's point, part of the reason we looked at making some changes here is with Argosy closure that occurred back in 2019. That was right after I came on. We were able to use our tuition guarantee trust fund, which it talks a lot about in section 16 of the bill. We made some updates to that, but we could use, and within the matter of a couple of months, I was able to authorize payments from our tuition guarantee trust fund to help make some students whole that had experienced losses with Argosy closure. Argosy also had a couple bonds in place because they had just gone through a change of ownership. Typically, because Argosy was one of the first institutions we actually authorized in the state back in 1992, they would not have a bond at that point because it's only the first 5 years. That's the other thing this bill does. With the help of Chairman Tippins, he thought we should have the ability to add bonds in later on, 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road, if their finances deem that fit. That's in this bill now. But what happened is with those two bonds that we had in place, it took us over 1.5 years to be able to get those funds from the insurance company to get that threatened litigation through the Attorney General's office to be able to get that, cost money to the state and taxpayers to be able to get the bond surrendered. And so it was 1.5 years before we were able to help make students whole with some of those things. So the idea is, in a certain sense, we're trying to self-insure through the tuition guarantee trust fund so that we can be more responsive to students in the state. And as the chairman mentioned, one of the changes that the Senate made was to set in place a structure for where we want to be at a certain amount in our tuition guarantee trust fund by 2040. That's what we talked about, the change that was on Chairman Martin's desk today to try to help us to make sure that we have our fees in place to be able to get up to that amount by that date, so that we can make sure that we cover students in the case of precipitous closure, which should be noted. We've had about 60 closures. I think it's 59 closures since I came on in 2019. Only Argosy was a precipitous closure. All the others we were able to work through with teach out plans and other types of things to make sure that they fulfill their obligations to students. The vast majority of closures that happen over the course of a year and over the course of the last couple of decades have been planned closures that we work with to make sure that students are given the obligations before they leave. It's just a few that have hit the news: Argosy, ITT Tech before that did not, but those are very few and far between. And I believe that the fund that we have now is adequate to be able to protect against a potential closure in the future. And as we continue to grow that, one of the things this bill does is it adds to the number of years that institutions pay in, from 5 years into our trust fund to 7. So all of that should help to build this fund over the course of years, and we'll be able to better, more successfully and quickly serve the students of Georgia that may experience a loss because of this than we were able to before.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. While I've got both of you here, I want to ask this, and then we've got a couple more questions, and you may not have an answer directly for it. I understand what you're trying to do, at least in most cases, with agents. You know, you're trying to make sure. I mean, it's not an agent's job to make somebody financially whole,
Right.
and so I did come to realize in several places of the bill. I'm going to read one, and I'm a little troubled by taking agent out in that particular case, and ask why. On line 161, you used to read, neither the institution nor its agents does not engage in advertising, sales or promotion of any false deceptive nature. It seems to me that we'd still be concerned that an agent for an institution, are we putting the agent's activities back on the institution if they're an authorized agent? Now, can you just address that, Commissioner, so that
Right.
I have an understanding of somebody is held responsible if there's a misrepresentation?
And it
to
was always
Georgia.
there. And that was one of the things that this we tried to do, was to make sure that we understood that even in our original code language as it is today, the onus is always on the institution. And agents of institutions were a much bigger thing back in the 1990s when they started. All states had these. This was before the age of the internet, where you could be able to see, is John Albers actually somebody who's working for this institution, or is this some Joe Blow on the street that is misrepresenting, and they're going to take my application fee and run away with it. That was a potential problem back in the 1990s that is not really as big of an issue today. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, we issue agent permits, and it's one of the things that, is a bureaucratic requirement that's required of institutions and is required on our staff to be able to handle and shuffle the paperwork. But we really haven't, as long as I've been there, and going back at least 2 executive directors, have never revoked an agent's permit or done anything with that. So it's just become a bureaucratic process that is not really needed. We made sure that in this, and I don't have the bill line in front of me, but we made sure that agents are still defined as part of the code. We made sure that it was added into our minimum standards, that those explicitly, if there is any behavior that occurs that is nefarious, that the institution is responsible for those agents, and that we can go after the authorization of the institution, which is what we have anyways, is the ability to be able to revoke that institution from being able to operate in the state if they have folks that are not acting the way they're
That's what I
supposed to.
want. Thank you. That's what I just
Yeah.
wanted to clear, the fact that it doesn't explicitly say agent there, they're still covered by the institution. You have
That's
a
right.
question, number 7, is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you being here. We've worked closely together since you took over this department, and you've been working very hard. And I appreciate you mentioning how hard we worked on this for the last 3 years to finally get it through yesterday, only to have a senator come in and strike everything we did.
Yeah, well,
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your continued work. And Senator Albers, you got a great partner right there, and you guys are doing good things. And I think this would be a great measure to move forward.
Thank you.
Online, Representative Clark.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question, actually, I know that it's a pretty lengthy bill and there's a lot in here, so we didn't want to go through all of the sections, but do you mind just kind of clarifying what exactly is happening in section 16? Because whenever I see language that kind of says, unless this, and then there's like a clause, I wonder if that's carving out specific institutions. So just like specifically, well, the whole section, but really I was looking, the first place I saw it was lines 513 through 519, where we're talking about who pays into the trust. And I see where it carved out, some people don't have to pay for 7 years, and just trying to figure out what's happening there.
Right. So the currently the way that we've tried to structure this is that for the institutions that have paid in under the current system, which the current system says that you pay in for 5 years, we wanted to make sure that those institutions are grandfathered in, so that we're, like a DeVry Atlanta campus or Decatur campus that's been around since 1995, fulfilled their obligations in 2000, that we aren't coming back to them in 2022 and saying, oh yeah, now you've got 2 more years to pay in. This is just a way to essentially, I don't know if hold harmless is the right word to use, but to be able to say you fulfilled your obligations under the previous code, and we're not going to come back to you and require you to do that with these changes. This would be for those who come in July 1, 2022 forward. They would be under this new section, that if you haven't filled your obligations, you have to pay in 7 years instead of 5. So that was the purpose of those specific line items that you mentioned there.
Let me jump in with you, Representative Clark, and that is because in addition, if they come in after July 1st this year, they have the different bond. They're looking at a different bonding requirement, not a static bonding requirement, something that actually matches their financial. So if you were an institution that came in with a strong financial balance sheet, there may not be a bonding requirement for you now, but you would be the other. You would still have the 7 years.
Correct.
So it's kind of a new way of participating and helping us to assure that the students are taken care of.
Correct.
Did you have something further, Representative?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Representative Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for bringing this. And I do understand regarding the the trust allocation and the agents. In section 1, and if you've covered this already, the first part of the testimony was cut off only briefly. So if I'm repeating, please, I apologize. But regarding post-secondary activity, could you walk me through how we came up with and the frame of mind in kind of changing that post-secondary activity, if it would be to put up guardrails for those professions, public health, public welfare, and public safety, is putting up guardrails. I didn't understand the inclusion of that in there. Thank you.
And let me further explain. I think we didn't have you on the right mic at the beginning, Senator Albers. So when you mentioned the part about the original reason for doing this about the testing company, I think probably Representative Perkle being remote missed that. So that's what he's after.
Certainly. And Representative Perkle, just to give you the genesis of how we began this process, I had a constituent contact me this summer. He and his wife have a small business where they help folks to study and prepare to take the PMP or the project management exam to be certified. They don't offer the certification. They don't teach all the classes. They're more of a tutoring company. They were alerted and found to be under this group, and all of a sudden were going to be mandated to do an awful lot of work, providing financials, spend a lot of money, et cetera. Candidly, something a small business really wasn't capable or able to handle. And at that time is when I talked to the governor's office and to Director Shook, and we realized that the real reason for creating this legislation some 30 years ago was really more for the folks actually were doing degrees and certification. It wasn't really necessarily targeted this way, even though the original legislation, long before all of us were here, was written that way. So the goal is less government, but more transparency and more accountability, and at a quicker pace than we've seen in the past. So this is just focusing on making sure we're getting the actual institutions that are only offering those degrees and certificates, and not the Mathnasium, as an example, who might be offering a tutoring service.
Thank you. Thank you.
So sorry about that to both Representative Clark and Perkle, that we had him on the wrong.
That's okay.
He was singing into the wrong microphone there for a bit earlier in that. Okay. And again, I didn't mean to cut the gentleman's presentation of the sections off. Just in the interest of time, we'll have this back again. Is there another section of the legislation that any of the members would like to drill down on, as Representative Clark did with section 16? Happy to do that. If not, let's see if we have anybody that wishes to speak to your proposition from the audience, and then we'll invite you back up to close. Or if you have another place to be, Senator.
I have to get to a House Education Committee, a Senate Education Committee. That's
Well,
okay.
if a House Education Committee, we'd let you go.
Well, it's just to get a lot of those important House bills out of the Senate Committee.
I think feel free to do that. We're going to hold this over today.
Great.
And I'm going to explain about the version control issue we have going on, but we'll do that. So if there's no correct or no questions for the gentleman on a section by section basis, we'll let him go. We'll take public comment, and then I'll explain to the committee how I'd like to move forward from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Senator.
committee members.
Thank you. And we'll let you be our expert in the wings. Did we have any people wishes? And after all of that, no one wishes to speak to the senator's proposition. We have a room full of people here. Now somebody should want to do that. Well, if not, then we'll stop, complete the public hearing portion of the item. What we have before us, members of the committee, is SB 333. Now, what we did this morning is we had an as-passed version that came over from the Senate. And we had a change that the only change we had intended to make was requested by Mr. Shook online. It would have been on the version you have, LC 500388S. It would appear on line 538, where we're striking 1997 and putting in 2040. That's the only change we intended to make. Now, the document you have in front of you may have actually been created from something other than the as-passed Senate version. So we're going to go back, and it is the the document we're looking for is the document that we have presented today, but to make sure we have the words on paper the way we want them, we're going to carry this over, as is our posture normally with the first hearing. So we'll have this back up on Wednesday, and you'll have, long before that meeting on Wednesday, I'd ask you to keep this version if you have it electronically or on paper, and you'll be able to see the difference. And I'll ask the attorney to point out the differences between the as-passed Senate version and what we'll have on Wednesday, which should just be that one day. With that, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next item we have, which is Senate Bill 397 LC 500321 ECS SCS as passed the Senate. Senator Goodman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to present this bill today. This is a governor's bill, high school equivalency legislation, SB 397. There are over 1 million adults in the state of Georgia who have no high school equivalency. In 2020, the state of Georgia created multiple pathways to get your high school equivalency. In the past, the GED was the traditional way you could do it. Now we have GED, we have HiSET, and we have Career Plus, which is a work-based pathway. As the law currently stands right now, these new pathways are not eligible for the GED voucher under current law. What this bill is going to do is it's going to make these alternative pathways eligible for the GED voucher. And additionally, what we've also seen is we've had people in the state of Georgia that have completed their coursework, but then yet don't take the test. Right now, when you complete your coursework and you're test ready, you can take the test. You have to pay out of pocket to take those tests. There's a voucher on the back end, a $500 voucher on the back end. If you pass the test, that you can get the $500. But what we've seen, if you're a single mom with 2 kids, taking that money out of your household budget to take this test can be an inhibitor from people taking the test. And so we're going to take that money on the back end and put it on the front end so that they won't have to come out of pocket to take the test. And hopefully we can get more people who are completing their coursework to take the test. This bill, thankfully, we had 52 out of 56 senators in the Senate that were co-sponsors, and it passed unanimously out of the Senate. I'd be glad to entertain any questions, and trying to be brief in the interest of everyone's time, but thank you for allowing me to present this today.
Assuming the House would be in favor of this, do you want to provide us a list of those 4 senators that wouldn't support your measure? I'm kidding. I have number 5. Representative Washington.
Thank you. I don't have much experience with pursuing a GED. Are you telling me that they charge a fee of $500 to take the exam?
No, sir. The fee to take the exam is over $200 now. In 2014, the cost for taking the test went up tremendously. And so it's over $200 on the front end to take the test for your GED. And what we're trying to do is take that money on the back end and put it on the front end so that these folks don't have to come out of pocket to take the test.
What is I misunderstood the $500.
So the $500 voucher was what you would get if you took the test and passed it. So now that $500 on the back end, whereas in the past, if you took the test and you passed it, you could get that $500 voucher. The money that we've been spending on the back end, we're putting on the front end so that these students don't have to come out of pocket.
But the cost is $200.
Yes, sir. But if they take the test and fail, they're going to be able to take it again as well. And then they're also still going to be eligible for all the GED grants and everything else that are available to go on and pursue their education in any kind of secondary institution.
Are these tests administered, Mr. Chairman, another question?
Sure.
Are these tests administered by some private testing agency?
They're administered to the technical colleges. And I have some friends here from the technical colleges and from Georgia Student Finance Commission that would be happy to speak on that if you need anything elaborated further.
I'm all for the reimbursement. I just was curious about the structure of this and who's charged what and why and who gets the money.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Online, Representative Bentley.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Well, I just want to thank the senator for bringing this bill. I remember some years back when the fee for taking the GED increased significantly, and it was a major impact on individuals in rural Georgia. So I see this measure as a way to help our constituents in rural Georgia. So thank you for this bill, and I look forward to the time that we can vote on it.
Representative Bentley wants to know there's 4 people who wouldn't sign your bill. Don't you?
I think they may just, I might not have been able to run them down.
Didn't get around to it at the time yesterday. Representative Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Goodman. I wanted to echo Representative Bentley and sentiment, but also follow up with Representative Rutledge's question. Going to section 4, in terms of the language that's struck out, it does seem to indicate, or the effect of the bill does seem to be that it only would provide these vouchers to TCSG as opposed to any eligible post-secondary institution. That eligible post-secondary institution being on line 65 and 66 that's struck out. Has it always gone to TCSG, and is this bill just clarifying that matter, or is this bill limiting who or where the voucher goes to just TCSG? And then a follow-up question to that would be on lines 69, it talks about those who are incarcerated who would otherwise be eligible. Again, kind of similar line of questioning. Has this always gone through or been administered through TCSG, or are we limiting?
And that's my understanding. It's always been administered through TCGSG. But Mark, would you mind, Mark Peavy, if you wouldn't mind grabbing a chair there. Mark can elaborate on this further.
Thank you for hearing the bill, Mr. Chairman, and great questions. In terms of the structure, I think I can answer both of the questions in terms of how this works. At TCSG, we are the state entity that administers the GED high school equivalency organizations around the state. And so those dollars do flow through us right now. In terms of structure of how it works, we're eligible as a state, and that those dollars flow through TCSG for federal dollars that cover the education portion of what I'll call a high school equivalency. And so all the classes needed in order to prepare someone to take one of those tests, we can utilize federal dollars to cover those. So that's done free for anybody around the state that wants to take those. When it gets time to take the test, we're not allowed by federal law to use the dollars that we receive. We owe dollars for the most part to be able to pay for those tests. So the test costs themselves, which are paid to the respective companies, whether it be a HiSET test, as the senator mentioned, that we brought in here the last couple of years, or GED as a whole, the traditional GED test, those costs have been borne by the individuals taking the test. So all the training on the front end, we have federal grants and dollars that are able to cover that. But the test costs themselves have been on the individual. When those test costs went up in 2014, and obviously we've seen over time that it's created a barrier for folks to actually take those tests. So what the part of what the bill does, and we've been very appreciative of you and your peers in the past when we added the $500 voucher that would allow a student, once they took the test, they'd have a $500 voucher that they could apply to the next set of courses they wanted to take with TCSG. So if they're obviously coming to us to get that high school equivalency so they can continue their education, that $500 voucher allowed for them to get a jump start on that next set of education. Since that voucher went in place, the continual changes that the legislature has made to open up other opportunities, primarily with the HOPE grant and the HOPE career grant that's been created since then, those really, they don't completely negate the impact of that $500 voucher, but they've added so many more options that $500 voucher isn't the same incentive that it used to be. And so as we've looked at that increased cost, that has become more of a disincentive for someone to take the test. And many of those students are not even getting to where they'd be eligible for that $500 voucher. And so that's why we looked at this legislation to be able to say, let's flip that dynamic. The legislature has put a lot of incentive and a lot of opportunity both in the budget and on the table in terms of Hope Grant and Hope Career Grant. And we believe we'll be able to help more students in the long run by getting over that hurdle on the front end. So
Yeah, if I could follow up, I think specifically on Representative Park's question, it's not at the back end any longer. The language you're striking said that after you pass the test, you have a $500 credit.
Correct.
We're sending that to TCSG, or in the case that someone's incarcerated, to them. They don't get it after the test because they got it in the front. So that's the reason that I believe the language is stricken at that point in the code.
That is
that
correct,
it
Mr. Chairman.
would have had it being paid to any institution in Georgia, wherever they were going to apply for it. But now it's being applied at the front end. So there wouldn't be an additional application in the back.
That is correct.
And
Mr. Chairman.
in addition to that, what Mr. Peavy said, that with the Hope Career Grant and those
Mm-hmm.
things, some of those expenses are paid for
Yeah.
on the back
And
end.
this is ensuring more folks get over that hurdle so they can continue their education. If you can't pay for that test on the front end, then you can never get past that. So that's really, I hope that answers the question, but happy to answer anything else.
But let me just follow up further. I mean, this is still applicable to folks that are trying to get the GED that may be incarcerated, that they are able to get this help at the beginning because if they can't pay for the test themselves, they can get this as well.
That is correct. And there's also a number of, to answer Representative Parks, part of your question was why do the dollars come through TCSG? We manage the adult education program for the state. And so it's not just TCSG organizations that offer GED. So you may be familiar with maybe your local church or a local organization that also it serves as a GED or what we'll call moving forward, a high school equivalency testing site. The dollars for this will come to us because those operate through our program. And so those testing sites that don't carry the technical college brand all end up flowing through the same program because we manage the federal dollars. So that's why you'll see the dollars and students come from lots of other places, not just TCSG institutions.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we? No further questions online. Do we? I'm going to ask President Riley, just because you've been here with us and I know you can comment. Can I get you to come forward? So again, I mean, I know Georgia Student Finance administers this. I mean, you could just talk very briefly. These are funds that are budgeted, in the budget, and just give us a quick view of how people get at them.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. The Student Finance Commission has been giving the $500 voucher in the past, as explained, after someone has successfully taken a high school equivalency exam. These monies will be repurposed to pay for the cost to take the exam at TCSG providers. So this dollars that previously paid for the voucher for future studies post-secondary now will be used to take the test. And as mentioned by Mark Peavy, there are many other vehicles at the technical college system that students could use to receive benefit equivalent to that $500.
Thank you, Madam President. I see no further questions from the committee on this. We're gonna carry this over as well, Senator. We try to let folks have time to digest it, but we'll if we don't come up with any additional questions, you're welcome to come back and join us when we meet again on Wednesday. If you have other things to do, helping us with House bills that are languishing in the Senate, we'll be happy to get this one out for you. We'll be happy to get this one. And Representative Bentley, the secretary of this committee, had sent me a note here that she'd be happy to help you run down those four misguided individuals in the Senate that failed to sign onto your bill and get you some unanimity. I think this might be the first time you've been before higher ed, and I'm just quite darn impressed that 52 out of 56. That's a pretty good number. I venture if we were to change the bill, you could probably get it passed when we go back to the Senate. But there's no further. I don't see any speakers on this. So with that, we're going to stay over. Let me just remind the committee that we do plan to meet on Wednesday, and with a potential meeting on Thursday. And with that, if there's no further business before the committee, will stand adjourned without objection. And without objection, we're adjourned.